The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference. I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today I'm so pleased to have on my show Jeff Pollak. Jeff is a very interesting man. He actually has 35 years as a career as a civil trial lawyer, and now he's decided to be an author. And not only is he going to be an author, he's going to do a series of books that deal with subjects ranging from romance to all the different things that people would be very interested in reading. And with that said, I'd like to welcome Jeff Pollak to the Susan Brender Show.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you very much for inviting me on.
Well, my pleasure. Needless to say, I just said that you were a lawyer for 35 years. I know we're going to get into the whole notion of what it's like to be an author, but on the other hand, I'm very interested in knowing why was that important for you to do. You had a very interesting childhood. Of course, your parents died when you were young, but you had an interesting childhood, didn't you? And why a lawyer?
I was very influenced by Watergate back in the 70s and watched it, the whole process as it laid itself out. And I thought, I'd like to do that. And that, of course, was a Senate and Congress type of thing. I wasn't really interested in the politics, but I was interested in the legal aspects of it. And that's what really drove me into becoming a lawyer. So it's sort of coincidental, but also somewhat ironic that my career has basically spanned that situation, Watergate, with what we've been dealing with Mr. Trump.
We're dealing with a very difficult time, and you talked about, in your book, the irony that exists and what is happening today with all of this mess with the pandemic. How would you describe the situation that's going on and how it's related to your book?
It's like this. The book has a theme which is tolerance, acceptance, and cooperation, and we don't have much of that today. When I started writing this book in 2015, I did not foresee that Donald Trump would win the nomination in 2016, and then, of course, everything that has happened since then would happen. But it was pretty clear to me, and I think it was clear to most people, that we have had a dysfunctional government for quite some time now, and that our internal divisions have been growing between left and right and what's left of the center. But I really didn't see that. I didn't plan it. Let's put it that way. That my theme would become what it has become in contrast to what's been going on with our country.
Yeah. And so you say what's going on with our country. How would you describe for yourself? I mean, we all know that the pandemic has really made a difference in everybody's life, and the world has changed. There's no question about that. But on the other hand, there's got to be something that is meaningful, if you will, which will come out of this situation that we're dealing with today. It can't be all negative. It just can't be. And so when you're thinking about that and when you're writing your book, or you wrote your book, was there some thoughts about positive things going on or negative things going on? How would you describe your book?
The book is, just to indirectly get to your question, but the book is called First, Second Coming, since your readers or your listeners don't know that. It's my debut novel. It's the first of a planned series of books, and it is a combination of supernatural romantic suspense that mixes fantasy, romance, suspense. idea of the book basically was that we have a new God in 2027, and the first thing that the new God has to do is determine what to do with the species that dominates our world, humans, because we're an argumentative group, don't always get along, we have wars, we have all sorts of things going on here, and what he is there to do is basically fix all of the problems that we have created on a global scale. So his question basically is, are we going to help him to do that, or are we going to be in his way? And if we're going to be in his way, we're going to be extinct because he doesn't need that obstacle in front of him as he goes through fixing all of the different problems. So he devises a test for us, which is a 60-day period in which we have to eliminate one particular global problem on our own without his help, and that is the elimination of religious violence. Religious violence was selected by me because this book was influenced by, inspired by, actually, 9/11. And so the book basically can be seen as a story that addresses our needs as a species to come together and to work things out among ourselves. And we're really in the process right now of not so much addressing all of that, but making it clear that this is something that we need to do. And hopefully, of course, I'm no seer, so I can't tell what's going to happen in the future, but hopefully this whole situation that we've been working through, the pandemic, the economy, everything else that's going on politically, will get us wise and get us moving in the right direction.
With that said, it's interesting because you're talking about faith, aren't you? I mean, it sounds to me like if you're going to be a safe society who agrees to disagree, I mean, because what we're talking about is, you know, the Muslims and the issue of the fact that they, you know, were responsible for 9/11. Again, I'm curious how you feel about faith because, you know, why would you write a book about religion if you didn't think about faith? So what's your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, the book isn't really about religion. Religion is being used because of the fact that 9/11, which was a religious-inspired event, inspired this book. Religion, there is theology in the religion, but it's mostly in the sense of quotes from the Bible, quotes from Dalai Lama, from Martin Luther King, from others. There are a group of some 400 people are brought together, most of whom, if not all of whom, are in some way religious. Either they've called for that as their career, or they are very faithful in their own private lives. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to get into doing some sort of proselytizing or anything like that. It's very neutral in terms of trying to convey that any one religion is better than any other. And it's not intended to bring people into one particular religion or another. It is simply that is where the problem is that this particular God has chosen to test us with. And so there is a reference. There are lots of references to religion, but it's to all religions. This is much more of an interfaith movement type of book, if you want to give it any kind of religious orientation, than it is a book about any one particular religion.
Yeah. So where did the first idea for this first second coming come from? Because most people don't really think about that too much, but you are really a person who does, and it's in your book. So where does the second coming rather come from?
It came from 9/11, and what happened was that. Well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit just to give a little bit of background here.
Sure.
My firm and I did annual seminars in various places across the country for clients that we had throughout the country. In New York, the place that we did our conferences every May was in the World Trade Center. Up at the top, there's a conference center, which I think, if I'm remembering correctly, was called Windows on the World.
Correct.
So we were there.
I know it.
Okay, so we were there every May, and that includes May of 2001. And so, you get to meet the people there. You get to meet the people who worked at the conference center. I also happen to have clients who were actually in the building. When 9/11 happened, I'm watching it on TV from here in Los Angeles, where I live, and just stunned, of course, like everybody else. I'm angry. I'm concerned about the people that are in that building, not just the conference center people and not just my clients, but pretty much everybody. But, worried about, in particular, about those people who I know well. So as I'm watching all of this, just random thought comes to mind about this planet needs a new god, someone who is a planetary turnaround specialist. Now, where that came from, I have no idea. But it came, and I did nothing with it because I wasn't I wasn't thinking about writing a book or anything like that. I was a trial lawyer.
Sure.
Well, in 2015, my son graduated from college, and he received he had a job waiting for him with Microsoft. And, he didn't need me or my wife to be financially supporting him anymore. So the question to my mind was, okay, how much longer do I want to be doing trials? And if I decide to retire, what am I going to do in retirement? So litigation is a very writing-intensive profession.
Right.
If you watch it on TV, you don't see that, but it really is. And I love to read books. I love to read fiction novels in particular. And so my thought was, why don't I put this together? Keep writing, but write fiction instead of writing legal briefs. So I sat down at the computer and turned it on and have this nice white screen with nothing on it. And this thought came back to me. Our world needs a planetary turnaround specialist.
If you would, explain that. When you say a planetary, what did you call it?
Planetary turnaround specialist.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, it's sort of a takeoff on a corporate turnaround specialist, but this god is basically someone who is sent by Milky Way Galaxy Incorporated, the owner of planet Earth, to fix this planet so that it complies with MWGI's planetary operational standards. That obviously is all fictional, it's all fantasy, but that's basically what this individual is. He's a deity who is capable of and trained to take wayward worlds and put them right.
I'm interested, Jeff. So many people are, especially after 9/11, with all that went on and the death of so many people. It seems to me that the belief in God was very difficult for people to really think about because they question, why me? Why did this happen to my son? Why did this happen to my wife, my husband? It's very hard to have faith and to believe in God. And you're saying that a God came over to do something special, but the reality is that people accept that when they read your book, do they say, well, okay, this is fiction and it's an interesting book, but, it's telling me to believe in God. How could I do that when so many people died?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take on it, Susan, and all I can say is that, obviously people who are greatly of faith and went through a 9/11 experience or the pandemic experience now are being tested from a faith perspective in terms of how can they trust a God who gives them this sort of tragedy. And there is no answer to that. There is a chapter in the book where that sort of thing happens in the context of a bombing, and there is dialogue in that chapter that addresses that issue. The basic bottom line to it is that there's something in the Bible, a passage in the Bible that says basically that God works in mysterious ways, and you have to trust what He's doing, which doesn't really give an answer to this particular question. But a lot of people who are Bible followers can look at that and basically say, okay, we don't know, but we have to believe that He knows what He's doing, and so we can try to accept this as much as we can. I think it's pretty cold comfort, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, while writing the book, what was the most unexpected thing that happened to you? Because as you wrote it, and of course this was your first book, something special might have happened, or if it's not special, what was it?
There were a whole lot of things that happened in this book as I was writing it. And of course, like you said, it's my first book. I haven't been through the process of writing a book before, so everything was new. And things were very, very unexpected all the way through. Probably the most unexpected thing was that about midway through the first draft, I started to hear a voice that wasn't mine. It was female. It was Latin. And it even had swear words in Spanish, and I don't know Spanish swear words. And this was my female main character, Brenda Lee Santa Maria, talking to me and telling me what's going on in the book. And sometimes, most of the time, she would wake me up at 4 a.m. and basically say, "Hey, let's get started. I want to let you know what's going on here. You need to get me rolling." And it was like, I'm a pretty normal person. I don't hear voices. But
I was about to say, who said that you're normal? But no, I'm just kidding, because I think we need a little levity in this conversation. But that's that's me.
That's okay.
So
that's fine.
Please continue. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay. So I learned later on that this is a pretty common occurrence with authors. And once I got used to having her in my head and having her basically narrate, turning me into essentially a transcriber, because her first-person view of what was going on, so to speak, was a little bit different than what I had in my outline. But I let her run with it. And part of what happened in letting her run with it was that the book became more of a romance novel than I expected it to be. I wanted to have Brenda Lee and Ram be, have an interest in each other. They were host and co-host of a talk show, and they were being besieged by God and being threatened by and even kidnapped by this fanatic group that wanted to kill them because they thought that they were promoting a false god. But I wasn't expecting a full-blown romance, and I'd never read a romance novel, so I didn't really know what a romance novel entailed. But Brenda Lee really took after Ram, and Ram really took after Brenda Lee, and that romance just developed. Yeah. So it was part of the book, and it's as much of the book as the whole situation with the new God.
Interesting. Now, if there's one fiction or nonfiction book that you believe changed your life, what about it? Tell us about it.
I was probably 10 or 12 years old, somewhere in there, and it was, I lived in an apartment building at that point. There were 12 floors and plenty of friends, and for some reason the friends weren't around, and it was miserable outside. So I had to do something. TV didn't work. There were only 5 or 6 channels at that point in broadcast TV. So I picked up a book at random out of my mother's book collection. We had a hallway that went all the way from the living room to the end of the apartment, and one side of it was just all books. So I just picked one at random, and it turned out to be her high school textbook on English history, which was published it was published in 1918, and I guess it stayed in circulation in the Brooklyn, New York system, and it came to my mother in the late 1940s. So I started reading it, and I was just utterly fascinated by it. And that book got me interested in history. It got me interested in current events. It got me interested in reading the newspapers. It got me interested in all sorts of things that were going on. And I think it also got me working toward the legal profession that I ultimately joined. Just a random choice, just pulling a book out at random, and it had a huge influence on me. I still own it.
You do?
Yeah.
And when you think about it, did it give you any kind of inspiration to even work with your son, which sounds like he's a successful person, and you passed it on to him, didn't you? The whole notion of reading and learning about all the different things that the book stood for. It's an influence on you, isn't it?
It was very much an influence on me. I think I did have some similar influence on my son, although he really wanted to be a professional baseball player. He's quite good at it. I was basically saying, look, you have to be top-notch as an academic also, because you want to get into the top-ranked colleges for baseball. You are going to need to show them that you deserve to be there. And he would take that to heart. He would get pretty much straight A's, and wound up going to UC San Diego, which for computer science, which is his major, is one of the top 10. So he didn't get the baseball career, but he got something just as good.
That, absolutely, and he could have actually, he can make it into, rather than an avocation, he can make it into something that is a hobby that fulfills his dreams and his passions, which, is my question to you. You're in the middle of starting a whole series on different ideas, and are you excited about it? Did this particular book give you the impetus to try to do more? And you could tell our audience a little bit, give them a tease. Tell them what the next book is going to be about.
Sure. I'm actually working on 2 different books right now. One of them is called, at least the working title is called Earth's Peril, and it's the sequel to First Second Coming. And where First Second Coming basically is just testing the water to determine whether or not humanity can help this new God or become an obstacle to it. Earth's Peril, or whatever the title ultimately turns out to be, will address 2, possibly 3, but definitely 2 of our global problems: climate change and overpopulation. Those 2 things have something of a link, and I'm working through that right now. I've done a good deal of research on it. I've started to write the book. It will take a while to get into publication shape, so nobody should expect to see it this year or probably even next year, but it's in the process. The other book is a book that has a working title of The Recycling Center, and this the same God that has come to Earth in 2027 is also in that book. But none of the characters that are in First, Second Coming or that series will be in that book.
So, for our audience, how do they get in touch with you? Because they're probably going to want to read your book after they listen to the show. I mean, I'm that confident about it. So there you are. How do they get in touch with you?
The best way to reach me is through my contact page on my website, which is Jeff Pollak, spelled JEFFPOLLAK.com. That page can also be used to subscribe to my mailing list so they can keep in touch with the progress on the 2 books that I'm working on and also some of my personal life. And, if they're interested in the book itself, First, Second Coming, they can pick that up from online retailers. Mm-hmm. Amazon has the book in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. Kobo or Apple Books have First, Second Coming in the ebook format, and there are a few others as well. I can also be reached at Facebook on Jeff Pollak, author, or Twitter at my handle is at JSPollak. Again, it's Pollak for both of those.
Well, today my guest has been Jeff Pollak, who has really given us a lot of information about what he's doing right now, which is so important. Writing books and keeping people really on the mark about, I would say, romance and fiction and books that really deal with something that people really need to know, which is that there is, in his book, the coming of a God, and a God that is positive. And positivity is what we need today with this pandemic, which is causing everybody anxiety and a lot of issues. So with that said, thank you very much, Jeff, for being on the Susan Brender Show, and I'm really appreciative that you did it.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation. You're an excellent interviewer.